Hello and welcome to the World Forum of Central Securities Depositories 2022. This is the first gathering since we last met in Morocco in 2019. And this 2022 edition will be fully online. It will be for us during these 3 days. My name is Anna Kulik and I'm the Secretary General of the Association of Central Securities Depositories in Europe. And together with me, Bruce Butterill will be helping me to guide you through the conference during these 3 days. First, before we start, I would like to thank our 5 sister associations from other regions in the world for helping us to organize and prepare for you this wonderful conference. Thank you. And also, I would like to thank a very beautiful line of speakers that has been prepared for all of you today that will be seen during these 3 marvelous days together. The wonderful speakers will be able to offer us a very beautiful diversity of their views, of their opinions, and we'll be very pleased to hearing their professional knowledge in a variety of domains, including cyber, including technology, including participants from stock exchanges, issuers, and many other stakeholders and relevant areas in their expertise. First of all, before we start further, I would like to say that EXDA and WFC are apolitical organizations. At the same time, despite that, it is all around us. We're in the current circumstances where we cannot be ignoring the geopolitical situation. And this is where, on behalf of all of us, those whom I know personally and without necessarily engaging our organizations, professional organizations for which we work, I would like to say that the situation in which the eastern borders of Europe are currently today are just inconceivably dramatic. And this is where we would like to say that our best thoughts, our prayers, and our wishes of peace are together with you during these days. And with that, I'd like to say that it's even more regrettable given that we have so many other crucial matters to discuss, to fight for, to work on. Some of these matters certainly include, indeed, the current situation with regards to the global warming. And now that we have only this very short moment to make sure that we're working together and preventing the permanent closing of window to stop the global warming. Additional thing together in front of all of us is certainly the global health threats. And this is where we certainly need to join our forces. Another important thing is combating the social inequalities these days. And finally, this is what's of greatest relevance to the CSDs today, is also the fact that we are here as CSDs in our role. We need to get together and to work all together to make sure that we are helping to ensure the social, economic, first of all, and financial stability. That area is of the greatest relevance, and it is solely on the areas of economic activity that we will be dedicating our conference today and during the three days altogether of the conference. The conference is divided indeed in 3 days. The first one will be dedicated to the role of CSDs for the global and local economy. We will be speaking together today about the sustainability, about the net zero and zero emissions ambitions of the CSDs and of the financial services together. The second day will be entirely dedicated to technology, to innovation, to dig in further into understanding the DLT, how it works, to cyber resilience as well. The third one will be all about business, about vision, and how we're making sure that we're able to scale and optimize the services of CSDs and of post-trade. This is, of course, with the objective to deliver the most efficient and the most resilient and sustainable post-trade infrastructure to the issuers, investors, helping the real economy. From that on, I have just one final housekeeping remarks to say, which are to ask you to be most active during the 3 days of the conference, to use your right-hand side chat to pass on any comments, on any questions that you may be having, and also to upvote the questions that you believe are most relevant and most interesting that you would like to be asked to the speakers by using thumbs up and helping indeed us to see the most interesting questions. Finally, also, I would like to say that should you need any further help with regard to the platform, for example, please don't hesitate to go on the very first registration page, on the first introductory page of the platform, and there you will be finding the team who is able to help you at any time. Now, without any further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Mark Gem, EXDA and WFC board person, chairperson, to the stage for his introductory remarks. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Anna, everyone, to the WFC. But isn't it a pity that we're meeting again virtually? And for many of us, in Europe and elsewhere, we've recently been able to meet again, and certain conferences are kicking off physically again, and that's a great pleasure. But this conference is a global conference, and the pandemic is not over. The WFC board, and we felt that we had little choice but to carry on virtually this year. And let's hope it'll be different next year and we can meet again in Prague. That's our hope anyway. And I was thinking about my remarks for this conference, and I noticed that during the pandemic, we marked, or perhaps I should say we failed to mark several key anniversaries. I noticed, for example, 50 during the pandemic, and it was 50 years ago that the first cross-border CSD settlement link went live. It was also, I noticed, the 30th anniversary of the first of these conferences, which served as a forum for building global interoperability between CSDs. And that interoperability between CSDs that you have all been a bedrock, a core component of globalization and the integration of capital markets over that 50-year period. And it will not have escaped your notice, it certainly hasn't escaped mine, that geopolitical events have tempered globalization. Our industry conversations are now peppered with remarks about fragmentation, deglobalization, and the consequences and the impact of policymakers' efforts to achieve economic sovereignty. But since the financial crisis, CSDs have been recognized as a core foundation of financial market resilience. And it is perhaps co-opted to deploy programs of sanctions and countermeasures. But despite this, it is obviously more critical now than ever that as an industry, we stay united and find ways to ensure that asset owners can continue to invest in the future safely and cost effectively. The resilience of our industry and its ability to act globally will, we believe, be vital tools in the journey to a net zero carbon neutral economy. As Anna has mentioned, technological innovation and the digitization of the economy will be both challenges and opportunities for us. At its core, the role of a CSD is to supply a trusted party to guarantee the integrity of securities assets and the finality of ownership transfers. The demand for trusted guardianship of financial records will, many of us believe, continue even as financial interactions become decentralized. That is why so many CSDs are investing in digital and decentralized solutions, as we will hear all about this week. Our industry has the resources, it has the experience and the know-how to devise innovative solutions and to continue to command the trust of market participants. So we have an exciting and stimulating agenda ahead of us, and the most wonderful opportunity to explore our key themes of sustainability and resilience, technology and innovation, and our visions for the future. So without further ado, let me just say that the aim of this conference is to ensure that we set out to be as successful over the next 50 years as we have been in the past 50 years. Without further ado, let me hand it back to Anna. Thank you and enjoy the conference, everyone.
Thank you very much, dear Mark. Great pleasure. I would like now to pass the floor to our colleagues who will be speaking about the sustainability that has been a bit touched upon already today, this morning, and now we'll be able to go further and see how the capital market infrastructures are able to help their customers, are able to support this fundamental objective that all of us should be having in front of us, which is indeed to ensure that we are all engaged towards the sustainable development. Without further ado, I would like to invite to this stage Avi Ghosh, Head of Marketing and Communication and SIX Digital Exchange, for the moderation of this very beautiful panel. Avi, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Anna. My job is to take you through the next 45 minutes and explore the concept of capital markets and CSD engagement in sustainable development. Sustainable development and ESG today seems to be everywhere and seemingly nowhere. Everybody wants to be part of it. Everybody has a take on what it really means, but nobody is really sure of how it's going to unfold. In today's session, there's a number of questions that you as an audience, and my job here is to represent you. So any questions or any concerns or any thoughts, please throw them into the chat. Ask the questions that are uppermost on your mind, and do take a look at the polls that we've put into place now for you to fill in, so that it gives us a piece of feedback at the end of today's session. I think the real challenge today appears to be between opportunity and the cost of opportunity. And I think that while the world debates what exactly sustainable development is or ESG is, the challenge we face today is how do we explain and debate and discuss what best can be done by the world's CSDs? What kind of processes, what kind of technologies, what do post-trade service providers most need to do? The beauty of my job is I don't have to know. I don't have the answers. But I am here on stage today with a team of extraordinarily qualified speakers, one of whom is Olga Cantillo, who is the Executive Vice President and CEO of Latinx. Good morning, Olga. It's 4:30 in the morning for you there. So I really appreciate you joining us for this panel.
Thank you, Aviv. Good morning.
We are also joined by Sarah Lovisolo, who is the head of Group ESG at Euronext. Sarah, good morning. Welcome. I think we're having a sound challenge with Sarah. Can the team take a look at that? You may be on mute, Sarah. Can you say a few words to say hello?
Yes, thanks again to Exeter for having me. I look forward to the discussion.
Great, brilliant. We have Paul Simmons. Is that right, Paul? Simmons? Or is it Simons?
That's absolutely right. Simmons is perfect, Abby. Good morning, everybody.
Euroclear, he's the Chief Sustainability Officer and Group Chief of Staff. And from Taiwan, we have Julie Wang, who has joined us for the conference today.
Hi, Ivy.
Hey,
this is Julie Wang from TDCC.
Good to see you again. Good to see you again. Our challenge is to follow on the speeches this morning and to actually keep the session lively and focused on the topic. What can CSDs do really in the world of sustainable development? Now, Julie, I know that the TDCC has for more than a decade been experimenting on a number of fronts, in fact, released products and services. Why don't you talk us through what you guys have done? The format for today for the audience is going to be, I will be asking questions. You can feel free to ask questions as each of the panelists gives us their version of what they've explored and achieved in this space. So, Julie, why don't you tell us about what the TDCC has been trying to do?
Okay, thank you, Abby. Taiwan is the third largest equities market in Asia. I like to thank the WFC for having me today because TDCC have been working on the corporate governance field for such a long time. Corporate governance has been a key area of work for TDCC since 2009, when we launched the proxy voting system. After 10 years dedicated promotion, all the listed companies in Taiwan adopt our system, with 95% of the institutions' ballots cast to it. We successfully bridged the gap between issuers and institutions. However, corporate governance requires continuous communications and engagement beyond just the annual shareholder meetings. That's why we decided to leverage our resources to helping companies embed ESG into our work. Here, I want to have a little bit of introduction about our services. We launched the world's first public and consolidated ESG rating dashboard since 2020. Now we have put 5 ESG ratings together in it. We also provide issuers with comprehensive ESG rating reports and the proxy reports issued by the advisory and the ESG rating firms, including the scores detail and the peer comparison. These reports can help issuers pinpoint their weaknesses and therefore enable issuers to improve their performance in more systematic manner.
Julie, you mentioned that you engaged with clients. How did that come about? I mean, how did they take? I mean, it's never easy to be a central depository and tell clients what they need to do. So how did you guys approach it in Taiwan?
Yes, I think in the beginning, we proposed this kind of services. We do face some challenges. The first one is how to deal with the company that were not yet on board with ESGs. The proactive approach of providing ESG rating information may give the pressure to the issuers. And so we want to narrow the gap. We dispatched the report directly to their email and held seminars with ESG rating provider, proxy advisors, and the major institutions. Allow issuers to learn from them and communicate with those stakeholders directly. And also, we faced the second challenge. That was the discrepancy or potential bias of ESG ratings. To solve this problem, we introduced 5 ESG ratings into our dashboard. I would like to thank the support from the ESG rating producers, including MSCI, S&P, FTSE Russell, Sustainalytics, and ISS. I should say that the multiple rating mitigate the potential bias and provide user with alternative benchmarks. That is very important to the issuer and the institutions. And we see a very significant improvement with the Taiwanese companies about their disclosure and the performance in the scores. Taiwanese companies have 10% increase on the average ESG scores just 1 year after our services were launched. Also, on the institutional side, we have a very obvious use case about the asset manager of government pension funds. They use our screening tool, ESG rating, and portfolio report every month to practice their strategy accordingly. So I have to say that we see this as a critical step, not only to better ESG performance, but moreover to a healthier space for dialogue and engagement between issuer and the institutions. So
would you say that for Taiwan, your approach has worked, or it needs a lot more momentum?
yes, actually, there's only the we use our own resources. We leverage our resources, so that is free of charge for all the institutions and issuers in Taiwan. There's not any mandatory from the government and so on. It's all of our from the TDCC, we promote all these services to the market. And we do see that this is a very successful model. This is what we've done in Taiwan, but this is also an effective model that has been used in other Asian markets as well. So we see that Singapore and the Korean and the other country like Japan has a similar approach. So this is a very successful model, and we share our experience to other Asian markets as well.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Interestingly, what you're saying about this being a model for the region, there's a fascinating story that is right across the globe, right? In the case of Olga. And Olga, I did promise I wouldn't ask you the first question, so yours is the second question. Good morning.
Yeah.
And thank you again for joining us so early. We've just heard Julie's example of what they have achieved in the past decade, and it sounds like they started really small but moved into trying to help validate the market as well, help clients understand how to benchmark themselves. You have a similar case where you started actually with a product. Do you want to just talk us through how you guys approached ESG as a revenue start and then realized it was much bigger? Do you want to give us a take on that?
Yes, sure. Thank you. I would like to first thank the WFC for the invitation and tell you a little bit about us. Latinx is a Panamanian stock exchange, and we're a sister company with our CSD, LatinClear. And we both are under Latinx Holdings Group, which is a company that is listed in the stock exchange. And I say this because I want to make sense of what I'm going to tell you in a few seconds, Aviv. And indeed, as you just mentioned, we started off looking for new products for our market. And this is how we came across green bonds at the time. They were very, very popular. So we started looking into that and doing our own research. And I have to say and admit that it has been a fascinating journey for the past 4 years when we endured in it. And I say this because, we have achieved a lot for the past in the past 4 years. And the latest one will be tomorrow, not the last one, but the latest one. We're launching our first sustainability report under GRI and SASB standards. And we're also going to launch our updated sustainability strategy. So this has been very important for us, and we're very proud of this goal. Back to ourselves.
You had mentioned that the actual strategy you started with needed to be revised. How did that come about?
Well, because like I said, we started off looking for a new product for our market, and then in the process realized that it was more than that. It was more about not looking into earnings. I mean, we have to keep looking into earnings, but it was more than that. And this is how we came across amazing people, associations, and principles that made us shift our objective. And I have to say, and this is what I was about to say, we have a very strong corporate governance body. We have created last year, and this has been going on for 5 years, but last year we created our board sustainability committee, and we hired a sustainability manager with vast experience and has added a lot of value to our strategy. concerning sustainability. And this is why we have been doing the update on our strategy, and we'll be launching that tomorrow.
Do you think it made a difference that it went to the board level, or did that help influence outcomes in your view?
Yes.
Did it give greater strength and credibility to the direction, or was it just?
It made it very easy for us, for the process, to do that shift, because we had our board members engaged from the beginning. We had started working years back in our corporate governance body, and having female participation, not only in our board. We've had a female president for our board, like not right from the beginning, but early stages of the exchange and the group as well. And we also have high-level executives that are women. So we have been working on women empowerment, not even knowing, and doing other things, not even knowing that we were going through that path. So it was very easy for us. And we also have the engagement of our stakeholders and our employees, and that has been very key to the success that we've been having. And when I say success, because it's been, like you just said, an easy transition.
So what I basically heard is that you started with an idea of revenue, moved to purpose, and then revised in 4 years a construct that allowed board input, support, and leadership, which contributed to what you view as your success here, which allows you to publish your reports tomorrow. Am I right? Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes.
That's an interesting take on it. Not for any other reason, is that there's multiple layers at which you have to operate. Interestingly, you looked at it in different stages of the evolution. So it's an interesting take. I'd like to get Paul to jump in here if it's okay with you, Paul. In January, Euroclear bought Greenamy. Now, Greenamy specializes in everything that is sustainability reporting, if I'm not mistaken. Talk us through where Euroclear is coming from here. What's your game plan?
Yeah, last January we did indeed buy a majority stake in a Belgian fintech, which is called Greenamy, which is specialized in digitalizing EU taxonomy reporting requirements. It actually enables firms to calculate their EU taxonomy alignment based on capital expenditure, based on costs, and also allows third parties to verify that data as well. It does something very similar in the loan market as well. So why has Euroclear decided to take that step? Well, I think we have to go back a little bit. Euroclear obviously is a very large international settlement infrastructure. It connects global investors with global issuers, particularly in the debt markets. And I think as we began to see the way in which markets such as in Taiwan and in Panama and other parts of Latin America have developed, as Olga and Julia have mentioned, we realized actually that there is a significant role here for post-trade infrastructures. And I think it struck us that if you look at all the initiatives that are out there in relation to sustainability, and there are dozens of them. I mean, there are financial market, there's GFANs, there's stock exchange alliances, there's asset manager alliances, there's data provider alliances. Actually, the post-trade environment has been relatively quiet in the ESG space. And when we looked at it, we thought, well, actually, given that we connect global investors and global issuers, and given that ESG data is now of immense value to investors and of immense importance to issuers, and given that it's very fragmented because every country is developing its own taxonomy and regulatory reporting obligations, and given the increasing demand globally for a sort of limited supply of really sustainable assets, there must be a role here for post-trade infrastructure to be able to funnel the data from issuers to investors. But of course, it's data that a CSD traditionally doesn't have, although as Taiwan has demonstrated, it's data that you can get hold of. And it's not data that Euroclear has itself, but it's data that Greenamy has an expertise in. And so that was part of the reason why we took a strategic stake in Greenamy, to be able to leverage those information flows. And this is a long-term game plan. This is not going to happen overnight. Data requirements in Europe, as you know, are changing regularly, and the number of data sets people need to report are hundreds, if not thousands, of data points. So this is the start of a journey for Euroclear in terms of trying to provide high quality data lake of ESG information, and Greenamy is part of that journey.
But now, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Euroclear specializes. I mean, you're effectively an ICSD. You work in multiple countries, handling pretty much everything post-trade, all of that data. Now, how do you actually get to leverage any of the data that emerges from those different CSDs that are under Euroclear for use in other markets? Like you say, data regulation is increasingly complex, increasingly focused on ensuring end-to-end data security, integrity, and privacy. How does Euroclear not get around it, but how do you manage the situation?
It's a good question, and I think this vast amount of ESG data, which all investors now need and want, is not data that CSDs traditionally have. And therefore there needs to be a way of obtaining that. And that might be through companies like Greenamy, it might be through other data providers, it might be through stock exchanges, etc. There are a variety of sources. But I think what we've noticed, and you say we're global, and we're looking particularly at the way in which we can help developing markets raise sustainable debt finance as cheaply as possible. I think what we've noticed is that there are a number of fundamental challenges globally with the supply and demand side of the sustainable finance market. I think, just quickly run through some of them. There's misalignment of incentives to participate in the market because there's lots of demand, but there's insufficient supply. And that might be because issuance processes for ESG is complex. It might be because meeting the standards are very expensive. It might be because infrastructure is unable to deliver the sort of information that's needed. There's, I think, some very unstructured information out there, which makes informed investment decisions pretty difficult. And that's caused by the global divergence of taxonomy and reporting obligations. And I think we're very glad that the IFRS and the ISSB are now taking action to try and standardize some of this globally, but that's clearly going to take a long time. Third point I'd make is I think there's actually, interestingly, an uneven maturity across asset classes with ESG. I mean, we mostly talk about debt. We rarely talk about ESG equities. And the final point is that when you look at a lot of the developing countries who are desperately keen to raise sustainable finance to support green and social projects locally, we feel there's a real bias towards sort of energy, buildings, and transport. That's the dominant issuer of debts at the ESG debt at the moment. Biodiversity, agriculture, land use, none of this is really have struggled, I think, to fill the financing gaps. And we see as a global infrastructure, there are ways in which we can help those markets by providing the right data at the right time. And our global network of issuers and investors helps us on that journey.
Great, Paul. Thank you. I think that's really, really valuable. I like the idea of misalignment of incentives, because that's not just a CSD challenge, it's an exchange challenge, it's an investor challenge. What it does is actually transcend all of the challenges that each player in the value chain has to bear in mind. And the challenge is, how do you then manage an alignment? Interestingly, we ran a poll this morning, reassuringly for us as a panel, The question that was put is ESG just another financial industry fad? Reassuringly, the audience said 20% of the audience said yes. 80% clearly said no. So it's here for the long run is what our audience believes today, which is where I'd like to bring Sarah in. Sarah, unlike the rest of us, you actually have multiple front ends. You have multiple exchanges and a post-trade capability. How do you look at the similar challenges? Because you've got a similar challenge to Paul, but with a front end challenge. How do your exchanges step up? And how does your post-trade step up in the CSD space for everything that is sustainable development?
That's absolutely correct. So we have can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
We got you. Yep, we got you now.
So we are exposed to a number of markets, a number of asset classes. So I think we span equities, bonds, commodities, derivatives. So we have developed a strategy supporting our strategic plan to 2024 that could address the fundamentals across all these asset classes and across all the market infrastructure that we manage. So including post-trade, so CCP and CCS and CSDs. This strategy is called Fit for 1.5 degrees. So we have picked a common thread, which is linked to climate, both looking at risks, but especially looking at opportunities and impacts. Given this strategy, laser-sharp focus from all the management and also the supervisory board, because it's one of the key pillars of the strategy. The challenge is, as echoing also what Paul said earlier, that sustainability is declining in different ways across the asset classes. So once you have defined what you want to achieve, what is the what you want to measure, the difficulty is to make sure it is translated into actions that are mature enough for each of the asset classes. So there's a different level of maturity in different asset classes, but also in different parts of the business. What for us can be a common and very clear goal is that of setting climate targets, operational targets for all of the business. We've decided to anchor our targets.
That would be a decision or a policy take across your organization, independent of which jurisdiction they operate in.
Absolutely, and we decided to anchor our targets to an external standard, so the Science Based Targets Initiative, because as we say to our issuers or to our clients, it is very important to get expert input from those who have devoted their professional lives to this. So it's important that we're not climate experts ourselves, so we need to look at global standards to make sure that what we do makes sense, it's science-based, and is, let's say, also validated by a third party. And so we don't worry about let's say, so much about the credibility, because we know that there's a lot of science behind, but we completely focus on delivering. And the focus on delivering is what we are experiencing, we're experiencing now. So first, this is a common goal across all our market infrastructure. One of the actions deriving from that is that we have decided to base our technology on a let's say, environmentally friendly foundation. That is, we are planning to move our core data center to a data center that is at the top in terms of reliability and energy efficiency, and it's powered by renewable energy that is additional because it's developed on site. Mm-hmm. And this will also enable our clients to do co-location services in this environment, which is important. And we hear that for our clients, this element of embedding an element of sustainability into trading is also important. And we've also joined the Sustainable Trading initiative that was just launched earlier this year. The flows are important from a market perspective. So we need to be aware about the flows. What are the asset classes that embed sustainability considerations? Is it possible to track those flows? And this is fundamentally the starting point also for the post-trade. Being aware of the impacts on the flows, of how relevant these asset classes are. Yeah. And the whole objective is to make sustainable finance very efficient, very cost-effective, and very also risk-free for all market participants. And in this regard, post-trade plays a very significant role.
Sarah, I think that's it sounds very noble and it sounds very purposeful that's what we're trying to do. But we have a great question here from, and I hope I pronounce it right, Wenwat Dai. So I'm going to ask you the question. You probably can see it in the chat. His question is the following, is that a stock exchange, and you have many of them, the stock exchanges inevitably look for higher and higher liquidity. But CSDs have to put safety as the first priority. Sometimes the two come into contradiction. So the question for you, and you use the word efficiency, how do you balance all that efficiency and safety with the contradiction that effectively is demanding greater liquidity and flow and transactions?
I don't think there is a trade-off because I think technology and is there exactly to service post technology is there to service also the liquidity, and there might be, however, a sort of trade-off within sustainable finance and liquidity. So these can be a pain point because very often sustainable asset classes are buy and hold, and this is, for example, the case with green bonds, and so you don't see much liquidity there, at least not across all our markets. There are the same levels of liquidity for those sustainable asset classes, and sometimes in sustainable investment, there's a trade-off between impact and liquidity, where the assets that are more impactful because they achieve a measurable outcome in the sustainable development space are not liquid. Perhaps private equity is very small entities, and so there you see a trade-off between liquidity.
Yeah, I think that makes sense when you've got limited instruments. I think as this becomes more and more common, that might give separate challenges. I see you nodding, Olga. What is your view on the question?
Yes, and I agree.
Thank you, Sarah.
I agree with that, and
so you think that there is a trade-off to be made between exchanges seeking greater liquidity in instruments and wanting to trade them, and in post-trade managing the balance of security and safety and transparency?
Of course, definitely. But then I'll start off with the CSD side. As for the CSDs, it's the same as any other asset class. You're looking for the safety of clearing, and having the custody of the securities as any other securities. And then on the exchange side, yes, we're also looking for liquidity. Again, as I was saying at the beginning, we started off with earnings, and then we found our purpose within the journey. But on the exchange side, our concern is not only for ESG products to be as transparent as any other products there are in our market. We aim to have transparency for all the companies that are listed in the security exchange, not only for ESG products that come to our market. So that's our main goal, to have that for most of the companies that we have listed in the exchange. And that's where I see the trade-off going on.
All right, but you don't see it as a long-term trade-off. You see it as a slightly more immediate scenario.
I think it will stay. The first question was if this was a fade out. I do not believe it is. I think this is here to stay. And we just have been going through very rough, tough years with a pandemic, and all the problems or the issues that were being targeted for ESG have now raised considerably. So this is not going to go away, definitely. And I see many companies, and we have just also joined a Net Zero Alliance, a public and private sector alliance here in Panama for 2050. And I see many of that going around the world. Like as Paul was saying, what we're looking for at this moment, and of course it'll take years, is to have global standards. It's very difficult the way it is right now. So I think we find ourselves with different standards, with different principles, investors not knowing which one to follow, where to invest. And as we move forward, I think we're going to go into this global standard. And what Paul was mentioning about Greenamy, it's very useful for us as FMIs, because then we can provide the investors the information, the standard information that they need to make better decisions and more impactful investments as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Olga. I've got a question, Paul. I've got a question for you in a moment, but I'd like to just quickly put a question to Julie. There's a question that's come into the chat. The question here is, when it comes to a CSD focusing on, safekeeping as well as clearing settlement, how does the CSD end up influencing issuers for ESG?
Okay.
This is from the depository in Vietnam. So it's
yes. Just as a
2 minutes.
Yes. Okay. I think as a CSD, we already provide multiple features for the issuers. So the issuers have been understand the methodologies behind it, and of course they had a very positive influence for those issuers to improve their performance. So as I mentioned before, that's a 10% increase on their scores. Of course, also they will face that as a potential reputation risk or not. So actually, I think the issuers in Taiwan do a lot of effort to promote to improve this the appearance for their ESG scores. That's it. Yeah.
So I mean, you're recommending direct engagement with them in order to help them understand the benefits that they can actually derive. Good. Paul, jumping to you for a second, okay? There's this entire notion of standards. Now, Sarah mentioned that there's the SSE initiative, the ST initiative, the XY initiative, all of these multiple standards across different regions. How would you, as a CSD, work towards establishing global standards that all of us around the table assume will happen?
Thanks. It's a good question. I'd also just take 1 minute as well, just to also respond to the question from our colleague in Vietnam about how we might influence issuers, because I think it's a really interesting question. And I think one thing we ought to think about as infrastructures is that we all have immense market power, right?
Yeah.
And if we were actually to start some form of differential pricing, then actually you may have some quite significant impacts on the way in which issuers issue.
So revenue,
I think it's one thing that's worth thinking about. I'm not suggesting that any of us are about to do that, but if we knew which was a green security, a pure green, which was a security which was maybe brown but transitioning on a very credible path, and which were the ones that were really not making much investment, I mean, as infrastructures, you could actually think about, if you had the right data, you could actually think about pricing decisions to perhaps try and incentivize behavior. So I think it's something that's just worth leaving on the table. I think, Avi, you'll need to remind me of your previous question briefly.
Well, the previous question is, and this is building off from something.
Standards. You want me to talk about standards?
Yeah. But it's building off something that Robert Ophel said in the introduction. In his introduction, he said that there's a tremendous amount of secrecy in the way CSDs operate across Europe, which is fine. It's not. It doesn't have to be front and center. But the key question then arises is, if there is that much secrecy, that much challenge in terms of data harmonization, and that much challenge in terms of multiple standards now emerging, you've got a standard for a country, a standard for a region.
Yeah.
You've got an SSD initiative, you've got an securities trading initiative. How, in your view, would all of that come together, and when can we actually look forward to something?
Well, we're overwhelmed with alliances and we're overwhelmed with initiatives here, and that's because this is a new topic. It's a highly political topic. It's important for the future of the planet, and it's inevitable that you end up with a lot of congestion in terms of the number of initiatives out there. I think from a post-trade perspective, I think we, as a post-trade provider, we're neutral as to which standards are used. Right? I don't think it's for us to dictate or to seek to influence the standards which the market feels issuers need to comply with in order to provide the right data to the right investor at the right time. But I think we may well be used as the pipes for the transmission of that data. Mm-hmm. And I think where there might well be a need, and indeed we're talking to people at the World Economic Forum and others on potentially the creation of an alliance to look at these issues, is to look at the post-trade standards for the dissemination of such data between issuers and investors, not the actual data itself. We're not seeking to standardize the standard setters, not at all. Sure. But I think there is some work needed around that. And I think we're obviously big supporters. I mean, Europe's a relatively mature market in ESG terms, relatively. Mm-hmm. But I think we are, given that we look globally, we are very supportive of the IFRS's ISSB initiative to try and come up with some global standards, because that'll help investors. Otherwise, investors are going to have to manage fragmentation of standards globally, and that increased costs for everyone. It also gives business opportunities to intermediaries, of course.
I mean, it's an interesting point about the data. I mean, why would you not leave that role to data providers or data vendors?
You could do potentially. I think what we've seen is that there is a vast amount of data that is transferred already between issuers and investors via CSDs. Just think of all the corporate action information that flows through those pipes. And I think it's a relatively simple step to expand that data set, and it may be that there are competing providers of this data. That's absolutely fine as well.
Interestingly, though, your audience actually believes that it's a 20%. It should be. I asked the question about where should the responsibility for compliance lie, right? And 20% said at the stock exchange, 60% said at the CSD, which might reflect our audience ever so slightly, and data vendors 20%. So the audience is with you on this one, Paul, just so you know. I also asked the question about whether, if an organization had to pick one single priority out of the E, the S, or the G, which one would they pick? And we've got our extraordinarily diplomatic conclusion, which is 33%, 33%, and 33%. All of them, one third, all of them 33.3%. So there's an inbuilt neutrality and balance that you all have here. We're down to 2 minutes now, so I will just take this moment to thank all of you for your time. I really think it was wonderful getting to hear your different perspectives, from Taiwan to Panama to, I guess, in Brussels. Paul, is that where you are?
South London.
South London. And Sarah, where are you?
Milan.
Milan. Okay, and I'm here at Lake Como, so it's been slightly global as a panel. I think that what's emerged today is that you can approach sustainability through a number of different gateways and portals, but you end up in very much the same places. You start with products, which is what happened with Olga and with Julie, and very quickly moved into a global sustainability strategy for their organizations, which is effectively moving into the reporting stage, moving into the endorsing stage. What's very clear from Sarah is that no matter how many front ends you have, it's making sure that you get the decisions at the top, which was also reflected in Olga's point when they revised the direction of the organization. The policy and direction and strategy must come from the top if it's going to work. And Paul made a very, very strong case for making sure that the data provides adequate insight into conformity, into compliance, and helps the industry move forward from a standardization. The real challenge is going to be standards moving forward. There are way too many standards initiatives out there for the moment. It leads to fragmentation and is a contradiction in terms. But I'm sure this is probably the organization that could help do that. And with that, I'd like to thank EXTA as well. And I'd like to thank the World Federation of CSDs for letting me to manage this panel discussion with you guys. And thank you all for the time you've put in. And with that, I think, thank you very much, everyone in the audience as well. Anna, over to you.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. This has been really a great panel, and sounds like a beginning of another new discussion that will need to be conducted at a global level. Thank you. Now, indeed, that we have been speaking about the sustainability, we are ready to move to the next step. And the next step, I think, is something that will be allowing us to pursue further the considerations that we'll be pursuing with our keynote speakers and with the next panels upcoming. But before that, let's take a very short break. And during that break, you can certainly use the networking opportunities of the platform, even starting a one-to-one call if you would like, which is also possible for you, or visit the sponsors booth as well. But then I will see you in 5 minutes time. So very shortly for a next keynote speech from Javier Hernani Buzaca.